The conflict alert went off, that flashing, insistent warning on the scope, and two data blocks I was working slid toward each other, two airplanes full of people closing to a distance the rules do not allow, and the whole room heard it and went still. I made the call. I turned one and climbed the other, and they came apart. Everybody on both airplanes went home not knowing how close it had been. And 3 days later, in a room with the facility manager, they told me it had been my mistake. I was the controller working that airspace. I'd been on the scope for 19 years, and in 19 years I had never had an operational error, not one, because the entire job is keeping the metal apart, and I was good at it, and I did not let a scope get ahead of me. Calm. That was the whole thing I sold. Calm was the only thing I ever sold. And in the time it took two targets to get close, I was the controller who almost let two airliners hit. I want to tell you about the man who put me there. His name was Keller, and he was the operations supervisor that shift. A supervisor runs the floor. He decides who works which sectors, when they combine, when they split, how the traffic gets spread across the controllers so nobody gets buried. When it works, you never think about him. And that afternoon Keller was short. Somebody was on a break, somebody had gone home sick, and instead of splitting the load, he combined two busy sectors onto one scope. Onto me. Against the traffic count, against what that airspace needed, he put two sectors worth of airplanes in front of one controller to cover a hole in his staffing. And I told him. I said the combine was too much for the traffic we had. And then the adjacent sector shoved a handoff at me late, an airplane that should have been pointed out and coordinated well before it ever got to my frequency, dumped on me at the last second, and it went into conflict with traffic I was already working, and the alert lit up. And I did my job. The instant those airplanes were on my frequency, I issued the control instruction, turn one, climb the other, and they separated. On time. The way you're trained. But the conflict never should have gotten to my scope, and it only got there because two sectors were combined onto me and a handoff came late. The second it was over, Keller's story was already made. He didn't tell them he'd forced an unsafe combine to cover a break. He told the facility, and then he told the FAA, that the controller missed the conflict and issued a late call. He pointed at my scope. At me. Here is what that costs a controller. It is not just the job. A finding that I caused a loss of separation, an operational error that nearly put two airplanes together, gets my certification on that position pulled, and a mark like that defines the rest of your career in the agency. 19 years, and working traffic is the only thing I know how to do. And the controller who almost caused a midair is not a thing you ever really put down, even after they clear you. I drove home that night a 43-year-old man who'd been told he might lose the career he'd given his whole adult life to, for a combine I had argued against. My kid asked me why I was so quiet at dinner. I told him something scary almost happened at work, and someone said it was my fault, and that I was going to prove it wasn't. I said it out loud, so I'd have to go do it. The trainee who'd been plugged in beside me had heard the whole thing, heard me call the combine too heavy, heard the handoff come late. But he was a developmental, months from certifying, and crossing a supervisor is how a trainee never certifies at all, and I wasn't going to put a scared kid's career in front of that for me. This wasn't going to get fixed by whose account the manager wanted to believe. It was going to get fixed by the things in that building that record every sweep of the radar and every word spoken and don't care who's the supervisor. Because here is what Keller forgot, the way these people always forget the one thing. That facility records everything. The radar is recorded, every target, every data block, every sweep, and it can be replayed exactly, the whole picture, separation measured to the second. Every transmission I key and every landline call between sectors is on the voice tapes, timestamped. And the staffing, who was plugged into what, when the sectors were combined, under whose authorization, that's logged too. The radar doesn't care about the staffing hole, and the tapes don't care that Keller is the supervisor. They just keep what happened and when. So through the FAA investigation, and with my union pushing, we pulled all of it. The radar replay, the voice tapes, the position and combine logs. And we put them on one timeline, the 90 seconds around that alert, side by side. The staffing log showed the two sectors combined onto me under Keller's authorization against the count. The coordination record showed the handoff from the adjacent sector coming late, far later than the rules require. And the voice tape, the part that saved me, was stamped to the second. It had my control instruction going out the instant those airplanes checked onto my frequency. Not late. Immediate. The turn, the climb, exactly when the airplanes were mine to work. The tapes had worked that traffic right alongside me. And the tapes said the controller made the right call the moment he could, and the conflict was manufactured by a forced combine and a late handoff. They held the review in a conference room at the center. The air traffic manager was there. The FAA investigator was there. Keller was there, calm as ever, still sure that a supervisor's word beats a controller's, the way it usually does. My rep put the radar replay and the voice tape up together, and we didn't argue. We played the 90 seconds. The combine under Keller's login. The late handoff on the coordination record. And my call, on the tape, timestamped the instant the airplanes were on my frequency. The FAA investigator asked Keller one question. He asked him whose authorization had combined those two sectors onto one controller against the traffic count. Keller didn't have an answer because it was on the screen under his own login. The trainee, hearing the tapes back him up, said out loud that I'd called the combine too heavy and the handoff came late. And I watched it land on Keller in front of the manager and the federal investigator. The moment he understood that the room had been recording the entire time, and the radar and the tapes don't feel a staffing crunch and don't care who runs the floor. They cleared me completely. My certification was never really in danger once the replay and the tapes were in front of the FAA. The record had me making the right call on time and the conflict coming from the combine. I went back on position with the back pay and a finding on the record that the controller acted correctly and the operational error was caused by an unsafe combine and a late handoff. The facility changed the rules that matter. A supervisor can't force a combine past the traffic count anymore without it being logged and reviewed, and controllers' calls to split are protected. The trainee certified, on schedule, and nobody ever put a mark near his name. I made sure of it. And Keller was removed from the operational supervisor role, faced his own action, and answered for the unsafe staffing he'd tried to hang on me, the same certification pulling machine he'd reached to feed me into. I still work traffic. Same busy sectors, same scope, and I still call it the second a combine is too heavy for the count, no matter who's running the floor. And sometimes on a quiet session, the target's all spaced out clean and moving the way they should. I think about how the whole time they were calling me the controller who almost caused a midair. The thing that was going to save me was spinning quietly in a recorder down the hall, keeping every sweep and every word. I built 19 years on keeping the metal apart. It turned out the tapes had been keeping that record right alongside me the whole time.